to the HFSP webinar on our fellowship program, which is a very interesting program, as you will see later in Barbara's presentation. Let me just give you a short introduction on who we are and where we come from, just in case you haven't heard about the Human Frontier Science program. So I will share my screen and talk you to a few slides just to introduce our organization. I hope you can see that clearly. If something comes up, Liliana, let me know in the chat. So HFSP is, so we're going to have an introduction. I'll give an overview of all of our programs very briefly, not into great detail, because then Barbara will follow up with a longer presentation on our fellowships. And as Liliana pointed out, we do a Q&A later on. So HFSP, where do we come from? HFSP actually was the result of a science diplomacy effort in the late 1980s that culminated at this meeting that you see on your screen. It's the G7 Venice Economic Summit, where the heads of state met and accepted a proposal by the government of Japan to implement HFSP with a mission to promote through international cooperation, I'm just trying to get my pointer right, to promote through international cooperation, basic research on biological functions. This is still our mission as of still today. And so this is very important for you to know that it is basic research and international. So since the original founding by the G7 nations, other countries have joined, and you see a list on this slide. Meanwhile, Australia, New Zealand, Norway, the Republic of Korea. In 2023, it was South Africa have joined. So we are quite a number of member countries, members 17, plus the European Commission, representing all of the European countries that are not individual G7 nations. We started working in 1990. We are headquartered in Strasbourg in France, and our annual budget is around about $60 million. So what is our specific mission? So clearly, as I pointed out, it's supporting basic research across the entire life sciences. It has to be innovating, cutting edge, at the frontier. So you have to propose something that is not clear, that is new, that brings you beyond the current point of knowledge. And it has to be sort of an analytical and discovery research on complex mechanisms in living systems. Our programs, all of our programs are merit-based. We're looking at the scientific merit, the scientific quality, key criteria, internationality and interdisciplinarity. And you will learn later how the last I word, the interdisciplinarity, will pan out in our fellowship program. So we were blessed that back in 2023, we got another sort of appreciation of the G7 level when the Science and Technology Ministers Summit took place in Sendai in Japan, where the ministers reinitiated and re-emphasized the need for international collaboration through HFSP programs. Our programs are fit on one page. So we have a research grants program. We had a special webinar on that earlier, late last year. And then we have the postdoctoral fellowships, which you will learn about today. We have an annual meeting for all the scientists that we support. And since a few months, we have started a series of frontier workshops. Just a quick word on the research grants. Those are collaborative team grants where you have to build a team of scientists from different countries, all working on a novel project jointly. It's a genuine collaboration on a single project. And it's for established scientists who have their own independent laboratory. We have started an initiative 2 years ago to support scientists from Ukraine with special money. And every year we give out a prize, which we call the HFSP Nakasona Award. What then is so unique about our program, and this is shown here, it's really currently the only known publicly funded international multilateral program where our supporters provide us with an annual budget into a single pot without having control over who gets funded out of this pot. It's a fully bottom-up curiosity and idea-driven program. Even in the fellowship program, we don't ask for preliminary data. So you can approach HFSP with an idea. It's cross-disciplinary, it's international. As I said earlier, it is discovery research in a sense. And so that to some extent can entail high risk. And it's clear to us that basic research may not work out the way you have thought it. And so that's normal. We know that. That's why there is this high risk, high gain component in our funding. Our money and our support is very flexible. We are an agile organization. We're only 16 members in our secretariat. And it really is following a Science Without Borders philosophy that is unrestricted international research collaboration. So how does it work? As I said, our member states give us a budget that comes to us in the Secretariat in Strasbourg, where we manage the proposal and award submission processes. It's merit-based, and then you would apply to HFSP by submitting a proposal. There are no priority areas annually, so there's no theme annual to which you can apply. It's all open, it's bottom-up, it's curiosity-driven and interdisciplinary. And then we have international peer review committees that are highly diverse in their composition to cover in a broad way all of the life sciences and neighboring fields. And then they decide who gets funded, and then we would support you over 3 years. So it's not a 1+2, it's a 3-year support. Here you see countries where HFSP research has or is going on. In blue are our member countries. There's South Africa. There's also a little blue dot here for Singapore. There's Korea and Japan. But yellow are also other countries where HFSP research has taken place. Our awardees are very, very accomplished. We have gathered 31 Nobel Prizes, a couple of Gärtner Awards, Kavli Prizes, Breakthrough Prizes, and Lasker Awards, which is very, very impressive. But we are also very fond of female scientists, 8 of them, that were funded by HFSP and who have gone on to win the L'Oréal UNESCO Women in Science Award. Since beginning of our program, we have funded more than 3,500 postdoctoral fellowships that came from over 70 different nationalities. That just gives you a sense of how global our program is, but in turn also shows you how competitive it is. So it's really a global competition for research money. If you are, after this webinar, interested to read about, to find out what science are you really funding, you can go to our website and search for the HFSP Science Digest, where you have a sort of a summary of annual research projects that were supported by us and that we have put together in this digest, and it's free to download. For any questions that you have to our programs, I would recommend to always use one of our official emails. Don't write to us personally, even if you know our email. It's always better if you write to the office, fellow@hfsp.org, because in this way you make sure that one of the office, which are 3 to 4, sees the email and responds. So if you write to us individually, it may be forgotten in a long list of emails that we get every day. So with that, I'd like to thank you and turn over to my colleague Barbara.
Hello, thank you, Guntram, and thank you everyone for joining. I will continue this seminar with giving you a brief overview of the fellowship program. And for that, I share my screen with you. I hope you can see it all. Guntram, can you see it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Good, thank you. So my name is Barbara Pauly. I currently run the fellowship program for postdoctoral scientists. I will skip this or really talk about it only briefly because Guntram has already mentioned the two programs. There are research grants for independent PIs. I'm not going to talk about those because I think you are more interested in the postdoctoral fellowship program. Every year, about 600 scientists apply for 60 awards per year. There are two sub-schemes in this program, long-term fellowships and cross-disciplinary fellowships. Long-term fellowships are for applicants or who hold a PhD in a biological field or have experience in working in biology already or in the life sciences, whereas the cross-disciplinary fellowships are for applicants who hold a PhD in physics, chemistry, engineering, mathematics in a non-life science field, but who want to move into the life sciences. Both are for research abroad in a new country. Both provide 3 years of support. They provide salary support, living allowance, we call it, plus, if applicable, child allowances, travel support, research support, and so on. So I already touched upon this, so I skip this. Before I go into the details of the application process and criteria, I would like to give you a few examples of what we have funded in the past so that you get a glimpse of what would be a project that is suitable for funding by HFSP. In 2021, we funded a cross-disciplinary fellow, Alejandro Martinez Calvo, who was asking the very interesting questions, how do bacterial colonies grow in 3D? And he found that in dense bacterial colonies, they become morphologically unstable and form these roughened and broccoli-like structures, as you can see in the picture here from his publication. And he further found that the bacteria that grow on the outside of the colonies have more access to nutrients and oxygen, and only those cells will grow and divide. Cells at the interior of the colonies, however, are depleted of nutrients and do not divide. And this causes this morphological instability and surface roughening. And this was quite remarkable because it has implications for example, making them potentially more susceptible to antibiotics. So this is really kind of very interesting and has larger implications in medical research. Another fellowship that we awarded in 2018 was also very timely. It is known that in warming climates or in warming oceans, corals migrate poleward towards cooler waters to evade the higher water temperatures of their natural habitats. And Jennifer Matthews found, she looked at 2 different species of corals at the coast of Australia and found that the metabolites that these corals, the invading and the resident corals that were there previously, were significantly different. And the 2 species, the invaders and the resident corals, had different abilities to adjust to the changing of the water temperature. So they competed with each other. And they also found that algae that were associated with these corals also had different metabolic profiles. So this was also very interesting. And the last example I want to show you is a very cool development of a stem cell-derived gut-on-a-chip system, a mini-gut, if you will, that contained microfluidic channels. And this is interesting because microbes that live in the colon are responsible for many health-promoting tasks. They provide nutrients, they fight off pathogens, and by developing this gut-on-a-chip system with these microfluidic channels, it allowed the researchers to create realistic fluid flow and a very nice experimental control of the conditions. So they could manipulate these mini-guts much better than in previous models. So it mimics the human physiology and enables physiologically very relevant studies of human-specific microbial interactions. So this is just to give you a small glimpse of what HFSP has funded in the past, but you can find all funded research if you're going to our website. So now, after these examples, I want to talk a little bit about the application criteria and the process of the review. Applicants for postdoctoral fellowships must propose to work in a new country with a new host supervisor. If they are citizens of an HFSPO member country that Guntram mentioned in the beginning, applicants can choose to go anywhere in the world, whereas citizens of a non-member country have to choose a laboratory in a member country. Applicants should apply within 3 years of having obtained their PhD, even though there are exceptions in certain circumstances for post-PhD interruptions. Applicants also have to have at least one first author paper published at the full submission stage or having published at a preprint server at the letter of intent stage. As Guntram has also mentioned in his introduction, there are no preliminary results needed on the new project. The postdoctoral fellowships, both of them are for PhD candidates and applicants that are driven by adventurous new ideas. High risk, high gain is clearly wanted. They are for applicants who intend to expand their work beyond the scope of their PhD project. So they have to propose something that is significantly different to what they are used to or what they have been working on. So showing that they're willing to leave their scientific comfort zone and propose a significant change in field and research topics. Therefore, candidates who are motivated to move to a new country and a new research environment and who want to learn new methods and be exposed to new approaches and ways of thinking. And that aim high, that's why high risk, high gain, and aim to disrupt existing paradigms and current established ways of thinking. Awards, as I said, include 3-year salary support plus various other smaller amounts of support. A few examples are shown here for the amounts of fellowship. On average, it's about $75,000 US dollars per year as living allowance, but it varies depending on the host country. There's a career building step built into this very flexible program. That means that fellowships can be interrupted and deferred for up to 1 year, during which time fellows can move from the host laboratory to another environment to pursue something that is related to their HFSP-funded project, but that can be in a very different environment. There is also the option of using the 3rd year of the fellowship to repatriate to one's home country. This is also interesting if you want to establish your independent laboratory later on in your home country. The success rate with regard to the letter of intent stage, which I will explain in a moment, is 10 to 15%. So as I already hinted to, there is a 2-stage application process. It begins with a very short letter of intent, the submission deadline of which is always in May. There will be a triage for projects that are not in the fundable scope because they are, for example, too applied or simply not in the fundable scope of HFSP. The remaining letters of intent will be reviewed by our standing review committee members that submit their ranking electronically, and about the best 20% of those letters of intent will be invited to submit a full proposal later on, and all others will also be notified very shortly. The full proposals upon invitation only are submitted in September. They are again reviewed by the review committee members, usually the ones that already evaluated the letter of intent. But in this case, or at this stage, the review committee members are also aided or supported by reviews that are submitted or are commissioned by from 2 to 3 external experts in the field. All of these reviews lead then to a scoring without a cutoff by the review committee members. All invited full proposals will then be discussed at the review committee meeting usually in January or early February. There will be a final ranking, final evaluation and scoring by all review committee members, and the notification of awards will then be made in late March. More details on the review process and the list of committee members are available on our website, so I invite you to check this out if you're interested. So when developing an application for a postdoctoral fellowship, it's important to show that you can think independently beyond conventional approaches, beyond conventional ways of thinking, that you're ready to adopt new approaches and learn new methodologies and technologies. You should propose a project that is clearly your idea. Of course, there's input from the host supervisor is important and is totally okay, but it should not be a project that is the obvious next step for the host supervisor. But it should really bring across how you contributed to the development of that project and what exactly it is that you bring to the project, what kind of unique skills based on your research background you are bringing to the host laboratory. Propose a project that's creative, at the frontier of sciences, and that is in basic research, that challenges existing paradigms and addresses barriers to progress in the field. I already mentioned the project should introduce you to new theories, new approaches, new ways of thinking. And as I also said before, it should be a clear departure from what you did before. And it has to be in basic research. Do not propose a project that's only an incremental step forward, or as I said, that is a logical next step after your PhD, or is a mainstream project in your host supervisor's laboratory, or that represents the next logical step for your host supervisor. And don't propose a project that fails to make clear what your intellectual contribution is. This is just a quick summary of the deadlines for the current cycle. We have opened the call for letters of intent in March 2025. Applicants who are interested in submitting a letter of intent have to initiate that by May 7th at the latest. And then the submission of the letters of intent should be with a deadline on May 15th of 2025. The submission of invited full proposals will then be in September of this year, and the award announcement will be made next March. And with this, I want to end my presentation, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
So we'll pass now to the questions. Guntram, do you want to start this process, or should I?
Yeah, I can start that. So there was the first question: is it possible to postulate for the long-term fellowship with a PhD in health science? Yes, that is possible. It depends on what your proposed project is. As Barbara pointed out, we fund basic research across the life sciences. We do not fund any strictly medical or even clinical applied research. So if you keep that in mind, yes, the PhD in health science does qualify to apply. There's another question regarding switching topics from PhD. Does only the topic count, for example, for microbiology to human health, or also field? And I cannot stay in the field of genetics. Thank you. Barbara, you want to take that?
Yeah.
Maybe with examples?
Yeah. Significant change of field is always a little bit hard to define. It's a gray zone. But if you are, for example, staying within the neurosciences and ask a research question, for example, on development of cortical circuits in the human frontal cortex, and then you're changing to ask a question of circuit development in a different brain area. That is probably not a very significant change of research direction. The same applies to, for example, if you ask one research question or if you have answered one question about development, limb development in one research or one model organism in newts, for example, and then you ask the question of, well, how is limb development regulated in salamanders or something like that? That is also not considered to be a very significant change of research project. You should really try to make it as clearly different as possible by asking a new research question. If you're staying, for example, in the same model organism, it should be a different question. If you're changing a model organism, it should also involve, for example, new methods, new techniques. So as different as possible, while it's not a formal criteria for non-eligibility, in our experience, the review committee members score those proposals where they see a clear departure from previous experience higher than those where the applicant stays within its comfort zone, his or her comfort zone.
There's a similar question, one down. Could you give some examples of change from the PhD field? What is meant by significantly different? I suppose Barbara covered that too. Let me go back to the other question. I would like to know, what is the funding rate for this scholarship? In the chat, Liliana has posted a link to our application guidelines. And if you guys want to look those up, the last page or on the last pages, there is a table which shows you for many countries what we pay if you go to one of these countries. Barbara showed an example of 2 or 3 lines in her presentation, but if you download the guidelines, you have the full list. And if there is a country that is not listed and you want to go there, we will find out what you can get there. So it's not a problem. Could you share your slides, Barbara, with us? I guess
Sure.
We can share the slides, of course, but you can look up the recording and then you see the slides. That's a simple solution. Or everything Barbara had on the slides is part of the application guidelines. You just read the guidelines and then you have the slides in text. So 2 ways to get so that's why we record it. You can always go back and listen to certain parts of the presentation that are more interesting to you. Then when do you invite for proposal considering the deadline? So Barbara, maybe you want to maybe explain again that timeline thing.
So after the submission of the LOIs in mid-May, there's a review process of those, and then roughly in the beginning of August, we will notify candidates who are invited to submit a full proposal in September. So they have about the submission of the full proposals is end of September, so they have about 6 to 7 weeks to write the full proposal, and at the same time in early August, also the unsuccessful LOI applicants will be notified.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Guntram.
So next one was, do you have any suggestions for host locations? Well, not really. The reason why we don't recommend your placements is because you have to choose them according to your scientific interest, but also where a host supervisor accepts you as a host, as a fellow in his lab. So really that decision and that selection is your responsibility, which you have to organize before even submitting a letter of intent. Depending on where you are and what kind of research you want to do, this can take time. You have to invest some time and effort to research possible host laboratories that would correspond to your research interests. And eventually you have to then write to the head of the laboratory, maybe do a presentation online, or if you're close, you can go there and give a talk and have a conversation with the head of the laboratory about your future HFSP application that he or she will have to endorse. Okay. So there's another question. I'm from India, already in my first year of postdoc in US. Can I still apply for the 2026 cycle? Barbara, that's a often seen question. Yes.
Yes. So by the earliest time of the activation of the award, which will for the current cycle be April 2026. A fellow cannot have stayed longer than 12 months in the host laboratory. So if you started to work before April 25, you are unfortunately no longer eligible to apply. I think we skipped one question that I see from Juan Carlos. He's asking, I'm starting my lab in January 26. Can a suitable candidate initiate an application for postdoc fellowship in this round? So a potential host supervisor has to have an independent position. If you don't have that yet, but if you can provide proof of evidence that you will have that position as of January 26, I would say then yes, this candidate can apply to join your laboratory, but we need proof that you will have this position.
One would be, is the fellowship taxable or is it considered as a scholarship? Yes and no. It's not a scholarship. It's paid to your institution where you will work as a salary, and the institution will pay you a salary that is taxable, because you also have to deduct Social Security and medical insurance, depending on the country regulations where you live and work.
Yeah.
I have an engineering background with no direct life science expertise and willing to apply for CDF. Very good. We like that. Although I do have some collaborative publication in life science, mainly on participating in material characterization. No further involvement. Does it make any problem for applying for CDF? Barbara?
I wouldn't say no. We really look at the publications and your contribution to those, and also take into account from what kind of research environment you come. If you're coming from a research laboratory that is purely non-life science, and if you have just collaborated with life scientists and therefore have a few publications in biology, that still qualifies for a CDF. But I should mention that at this point, it also doesn't matter so much for which subprogram you apply, because the categories can always be changed later if the review committee members feel that the other category fits better.
But if there are students or PhDs from engineering, chemistry, math, computer science among the audience here, you're most encouraged to apply for the cross-disciplinary fellowship program.
Yes.
We'll sort this out at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one question, which is strange. Can one person submit two proposals, rely on different hosts and different projects? No, clearly no, because a host needs to endorse you. And if you tell your one host that you applied, and if you tell the second host, I have applied with the other person as well, one of the two hosts will get upset. I wouldn't advise to do that. So let's just go to the next. Can you apply in a country where you're doing your PhD? No, you cannot, because after the PhD, you have to move to a new country where you have never worked before. That's HFSP Fellowship Program is a mobility program, and therefore you would need to find a host laboratory in a different country. The reason for that is not only, as Barbara pointed out just earlier, not only do we want to encourage you to, advance your research horizon by learning new technologies and new methods, we will also want you to get experience how research is done in a different country, in a different setting. That is part of your forming years to become an established researcher. And it's very helpful to know how research is done in different countries. I performed a pilot study during the last year of my PhD, which methodologically diverges from the majority of my PhD work. For my postdoc, I would like to build on this pilot study and ask a new question. Would this be a problem? I think this depends how you present it. If you present it in the way you formulated your question, I think it would be totally acceptable. So saying, I've tried this and I want to build on this with these new methods, I think that would still fly and would be acceptable. I'm starting my lab in 2026. That was the question we had already, so we skipped that. I didn't understand the difference between LOI initiation early in May and the deadline sometimes later. Could you explain this better? Barbara?
Yeah, so we introduced this initiation step in which we ask you to provide details on you, on your research proposal, but very very little information. We want information on the host supervisor at this stage because each host supervisor can only support the application of one candidate per cycle. And if we already know upfront, like in this week before the submission of the LOI, that we see that a host supervisor is proposed by 2 candidates, we can get in touch with the candidates and the host supervisors early on and try to find a solution.
Yeah, consider it as an initial registration, an advanced registration before you submit your LOI. It's just for operational, ease of our office to know how many will come in the end. So that's the idea. Is research on vaccines considered an application or therefore ineligible? Barbara, you want to?
It depends really. If you starting your proposal and suggest I want to develop a vaccine for this and that disease or against this and that pathogen, then this is not fundable by HFSP. If you are starting to look at the mechanism, for example, of bacterial resistance or HIV transmission, and in the end, in the long run, this leads to the development of a disease, that's totally okay, of course, but it cannot start with a purely applied research question. It has to start with a fundamental basic question in biology. Many of our projects in the end will lead to the development of tools, of vaccines, of antibiotics, which is great. We have a lot of patents coming out of the research grants, but also the fellowships, but it cannot be the starting point.
And in a similar way, it's the answer to the next question as well. Does a new way of mechanical implant considered a life science, or should be a biological question? I mean, ask the question like that. A mechanical implant is not basic biology in the sense that HFSP would support it. It is, of course, an important issue, but it's really a health or clinically related project. So it has to be a biological question.
But let me further develop this thought a little bit. If you are, for example, asking or posing the question, what is the biological basis of walking, for example, and that in the end, in the long run, leads to the development of a walking device, that's of course fundable, but it needs to be on the basis, on the molecular basis of a life scientific problem.
I've done PhD there and want to move to Chile. Of course, you can apply to go to Chile. I've been to Chile myself. It's great labs there. Yeah, I would encourage you to apply and go to Chile. Absolutely. In case if I have developed interest in vibrational, it's in biological systems. And during PhD, we're an expert in it. Should it be a good idea to propose in this language with the super? Yeah, I think if you have a very cool idea for a research project where you don't feel comfortable in that field, you need to get a host supervisor that can advise you accordingly. If that would be not the case, the review committee would say that applicant has no intellectual support in the future host lab. And so that is absolutely recommendable for you to do. Can I apply to a host lab in the country where I did my MSc? Does the mobility rule apply only to the country where I did my PhD? I think we have a rule on that, Barbara, right?
Yes, master thesis is included in the 12-month rule, so no, you cannot apply if you have spent more than 12 months in that country.
Yeah, because it's part of higher education and research training, and that's why we don't consider
anything before a master's is not counted.
Yeah. So I think we've done all.
No,
other questions in
there are many more. For example, there's a question of whether the third year of the fellowship can be used to go back to the country of residence. Yes, of course, there's no need to change.
But that's not in the Q&A, it's in the chat, right?
No, it's in the chat.
In the chat, yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, okay, go ahead, Barbara, sorry.
There are many in the chat. Let me just go to where we stopped.
So we stopped, Barbara, if it's useful for you. The first question that we didn't answer is from Sweetie Meal. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrongly.
Is that
exactly
curious during questions, but does having a long-term applied science or health-related impact help? Yeah. I think your question, yeah, Barbara, go ahead.
I mean, it's, as I said, it has to be a basic question in biology. If it has a long-term or if it has long-term implications for health-related issues, then it's good, it's great, sure, but it has to be a basic biological project.
Next question by Vishal Mane. Can the host supervisor be one you have collaborated with? Someone briefly.
Well,
what are the possibilities? What are the possibilities for joint supervisors? I think it has to be a new constellation because of the 12 months rule. And if, in particular, we see this sometimes in the cross-disciplinary fellowships, if it deemed worthy to have two supervisors, one in biology and one in chemistry or physics, why not? We do accept that. Next one. Hi, my PhD defense was in February 22. Postdoc fellowship application submission for this year, 2025. It comes under criteria or not? Please advise. Barbara. Timeline.
Ideally, or the cutoff date for PhD defense is September 2022. There are exceptions, for example, for health-related reasons. In that case, I would advise you to get in touch with the office and we can determine whether you can claim some exception.
Okay, there's another one regarding time spent in the country by Adam Little. Are there any restrictions on how long you can have worked in the same country? You see that question?
Yes, we have answered this already. I think by the time of the activation of the award, you can have only spent 12 months in total in the host laboratory, but also in the host country. And other stays in the host country are taken into account. For example, if you have done a 6-month internship in that host country, but in a different host laboratory, that is also taken into account. So 12 months in total.
Okay, here comes an interesting question, which I can relate to. It becomes really hard to find a nice balance between the novel innovative project with the feasibility backed by your expertise of the project. True, that's a challenge. It has to be, well, what you can consider is if you take your current expertise and evolve it and try something new, and then have the backing of your host supervisor, that would certainly advise you how you would pitch this novel project to HFSP, I think that will work out. We are not looking for, I mean, what you propose to HFSP has to be feasible and doable. And if, for example, your host supervisor says, I mean, you have to pitch it this way and this way, that advice would be important to follow. That next question we've done.
Yeah. We should step to Maria Florencia question. My PhD diploma, it's in the next
chemical
one.
Sciences. However, I focused on plant molecular biology and physiology in my publications are in this field. Yeah, this is you're Maria Florencia Bogino. You're one of those applicants, possible applicants that has covered already a broad field. I think it really depends on what really comes out of your CV, of your publications. But I guess you could start out by submitting for a cross-disciplinary fellowship, and Barbara and the reviewers will then see what will happen with it. So it will not be held against you, just to make that point. So feel free to apply for either of them.
I would recommend in this case to apply for a long-term fellowship, actually, because if you have already experience in molecular biology and physiology, that does not sound like a CDF to me. But as I said, the categories can be changed at any point.
Are there any host selection guidelines? No, we don't sort of provide guidelines or suggestions for you. As I explained earlier, you have to do that based on your research experience and research project for the future. Does a new mechanical implant, we looked at that already. Is it possible in Chile we had, in case I've developed interest in vibration, we had that. Is overhead calculation included? Well, yes and no. I mean, the university where you go to will get our fellowship package in certain installments, and usually they may charge the laboratory an overhead, but not to you directly. if my PhD is biomedical and should apply for long-term funding, long-term fellowship with my peer work on biomaterials, but my proposal is to study biological environment. Is it a major shift? Well, it depends on how you pitch it. And you know, it depends really on the detail. I mean, if you say your PhD is biomedical engineering and you want to look into biological mechanisms, then it may be a significant shift, but really it depends what Bauer just explained for the chemistry and molecular biology. It really depends how significant the deviation that is. It definitely may be considered a change. Yes.
I can also
how major is depends on how you present it.
Yeah, I can also offer that you send me a summary of your PhD and your proposed postdoctoral project, and then I look at it and have more details, more information, because this is rather vague. So hard to say, sure.
Can a senior postdoc be a co-host supervisor? I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if you're in a lab, you're hosted by the head of the laboratory and there's a senior postdoc, he can always help you, he or she. I wouldn't add that person as a co-host.
No.
I would just, you're free to enter any collaboration within your lab, of course. You know. Manish came back to say, I mean, vibrational communication. Yeah, this is a new field. We had seen a couple of applications. Yeah, sure. Vibrational communication in biology is an interesting thing. Yes. My PhD defense is done in February. Can I apply for? Yeah, we had that, I think. Developing methods in life sciences can be subject for proposal. Methods? What do you mean? Deep learning in ecology? It really depends. If it's an interesting question. AI and deep learning approaches are all over the place. It really depends on if your efforts in developing deep learning algorithms relate to a biological question under study. If you were to develop something for conservation science or monitoring the environment, that wouldn't be within the realm of our scientific mission. So it has to be a basic biological question and an investigation on that. For the third year of the HFSP Fellowship, can I use it to go back to my current country of residence?
We did this. You can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who funds research if HF... Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Pauly.
No. The third year is really flexible. You can stay in your original host laboratory. You can go back to your home country or to any other HFSPO member country.
Funds research if HFSP only pays your salary. Well, Amar, this is the thing at the postdoctoral level. And this is why you have to contact a host supervisor before to discuss the project. With your research or with your HFSP fellowship comes your salary. There is a little bit of research and travel allowance, which doesn't cover the cost that would be needed to be paid for all your research over 3 years. But usually a host supervisor who is welcoming an HFSP fellow with salary is always very happy to pay for your research charges, equipment and stuff like that. So I wouldn't worry about that. How much do publications affect the results? Because applicants, especially from underdeveloped countries, do not have laboratory opportunities, especially in basic science. This affects their inability to publish. A very important question.
Good question.
And I'm glad you asked that question, Goral. So let me take a step back. In our program, all it takes is one single publication. And it doesn't have to be in Cell, Science, or Nature. One publication is enough to enter the competition, period. However, the reviewers always look not only where you have published, but at the content of the publication. And if this is convincing, then it's good. Then you have a chance to get funded. So it doesn't take 10 science papers. It takes one publication that is very good, no matter which journal. Okay?
Yes.
Pasha Chakraborty. I've completed my PhD from the Department of Chemistry. However, my work was in the interface of chemistry and cell biology. Now for my postdoc, I want to move towards cell biology and structural biology. I would think long-term fellowship. We had a similar case before.
Yeah.
Yes.
But again, based on this vague information, it's
Yeah.
hard to say. But again, it doesn't matter so much at this stage. But I would also say long term.
Yeah. Should the proposal be realistic and be using currently available techniques, generate new technology, which stand a high chance of getting funded? Both. It really depends on the context and how you present your work. If you propose to generate new technology or new methods, then it should be focused on the biological problem. We will not fund methods development that are not related to a biological question. Okay, but if you plan to do that or integrated that into a research project, that's fine. Can you tell me about your philosophy of high risk, high gain? Many funders most of the time want to be sure that you will reach your goal.
Yep.
We don't care.
Yeah, that's exactly
We
what
don't care.
Distinguishes HFSP from other funders. We have the saying, you're expected to shine, but you're allowed to fail. If we want to promote high risk, high gain, we have to accept the fact that sometimes things don't work out. If you argue for it, and if you have a backup plan, that's of course great, but there's no punishment if you don't reach your goal.
Yeah, in particular, in a basic research project, even if you present us in your proposal with deliverables and milestones, which I recommend not to do, but if you were to do so, there's no guarantee that it will work. Nobody will take a guarantee, and our reviewers know that, and our reviewers are instructed accordingly that they can select, they can have positive selection for high risk proposals. So go ahead, do that. How different the research project should be compared to my current ones? Well, it should be different. Let's say I'm working on topic X with approach A. That's very general. However, I want to learn approach B, which I have never used, but still do understand the same topic X better. Yeah, this is kind of, reminds me when I started at HFSP, it was the heyday of structural biology. They moved from crystallography to NMR and all covered. So, I mean, you really have to flesh this out in detail and present it as a novel way that would really advance the knowledge and the field in a way.
But
it's okay, but it
if
really depends on the project.
If you propose to answer or to look at the same question just using a different methodology or approach, I would say that's not considered a very significant change.
And here comes the $10 million question. While I apply for the scholarships like Humboldt, Marie Curie, can I also apply for HFSPO? You could add Humboldt, Marie Curie, and EMBO. Of course, you have to. You must, because fellowship competitions are tough, and you need to place more eggs in your basket in order to make sure that you get at least one. There are candidates who are in the luxury position to choose because they get all three or all four. So yes, you have to apply for everything that comes across.
You cannot have two fellowships at the same time. If you're lucky to get one or more offers, you have to choose which one you will take.
Yeah. So that's okay. Even though Marie Curie and EMBO allow to have them in sequence. So you need to do some research about that. I did my master's in chemistry and will get a PhD in food science and tech. So I can apply for cross-disciplinary for life science stream. I don't think this is really cross-disciplinary. It's long-term fellowship. If you have a PhD in food science, I mean, it really depends. One would need to know more detail about the tech bit. But from the way you worded it, it sounds like a long-term fellowship. Would you consider this an incremental or obvious next step? Well,
which one?
It relates to your previous question.
I don't know this.
It's to this question. It really depends on the degree of change.
Okay, this one.
And what the potential is for this incremental or for this step increase. So that would need to come out at the proposal.
Yeah.
Could you please clarify a bit more about the child allowance? Expected mothers are allowed to apply for child allowance or not? Barbara, I think this is an important topic.
Yeah, of course. Child allowance will be paid to both parents, or even if the fellow is male, is the father, but only after the child is born, of course.
And it's a simple process. That's the HFSP way.
Yeah.
If you become a family, you just write to Barbara's fellowship office, let them know that you're expecting a child or the child is born, and that will automatically set things in motion. That's the way we operate.
And there's also
There's no application deadline for child allowance.
No, there isn't. It's very informal. You just send the birth certificate, and then starting from that date,
exactly,
you pay the child allowance, which is like 10% of the living allowance. I should also mention that we have parental leave allowances, which is 3 months of paid parental leave allowance that either parent can take after the birth of the child.
Yeah. So here we go. If I'm already in the country where I want to apply for the postdoc, but I'm working in that lab, I am only traveling. Does this apply for time counting? This is one of these borderline cases, Barbara, where somebody travels to the host country and spends time already in the host lab. If
it's really time spent on personal travel, on, you know, surfing in Hawaii, and then you want to apply for a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard, that's possible. But you should not have done research-related work in that host country.
Yeah. Interesting one following. Hello, I'm finally a PhD student in plant ecology. That was my field too, my PhD. I still have not submitted my thesis. When is the best time to apply for HFSP? Also, how early should one contact the host institutes? Could you give us a brief flowchart of how this application works, timelines, deadline? So this is a very important question because it does take time. And as you pointed out, Sachin, if I may say your name, I think the best time is already before you submit your thesis.
Yep.
And just starting to make first contacts. Write to a host supervisor where you're interested to go. Fill that person in about the research that you that you have done in your thesis. Maybe if you have published already a paper, depending on country where you are, you have to publish papers for your thesis. Get in contact with the host supervisor, start a conversation, and then as soon as you have submitted your PhD or done your thesis defense, have this conversation become more concrete. Go visit the lab, present yourself, give a talk about your work.
Let me make this clear. You don't have to have your thesis submitted by the time you apply. You only have to have your thesis submitted if you apply this year by December 2025.
Yeah, so all that is mentioned also in the guidelines, but you cannot start too early, literally. Yes. So it's really good to get ahead of the game. If we get 2 grants and I can have both, can I postpone the HFSP for a year? Well, really, if you apply for 2 or 3 fellowship programs, if you get 2 fellowships offered, I think HFSP will ask you to choose clearly, because research money is very hard to come by, in particular for international mobility, depending on country where you come from. And therefore, HFSP will have to ask you to choose. You cannot, hold up the HFSP fellowship for 2 or 3 years until we've done the first one. Regarding the 30 of the fellowship, you said that I can use it to go back to my current institute. So does that mean I can work with my current supervisor with a different PI from my current institute?
Yes.
Yeah, if you go back to your home institute, you can pick it up where you left it off if you wanted to. Yes, shouldn't be a problem. There are more questions in the Q&A again. Oh my goodness. Wow, guys, you're very, very interested. That's very nice. Let's finish here in the chat and then we move over. Hello again. I will have a funded grant to continue my PhD thesis for 6 months at Harvard. Congratulations. So I can also get an LOI from the same lab at Harvard? No. I mean, if you do your PhD at Harvard University, where I was for my postdoc, you have to change country. You apply for a new country to do your HFSP fellowship project. You cannot stay at Harvard, even though it's nice there. How about if I'm already living for more than 12 months in the host country, but working in something not related to scientific research? I think you would need to enter into a conversation with our award office. That's difficult to judge here in a comment chat, but I would encourage you to send an email to fellow@HFSP and get a chat with Barbara personally. It's borderline. Do you accept for first LOI application, a first author paper accepted in principle? You can try. I mean, there's only accepted. Accepted in principle means accepted with revisions. So you better make sure that you get the full accepted and get the revisions done in a hurry.
Or
the time counting goes until April 26. Yeah. I'm not sure what you mean with time counting. That's the cutoff. So if you
that's
have
the
worked,
earliest starting date for your project, and it means the 12-month rule. Yes, that starts from April 26.
Yeah. Okay.
Going backwards. Like
Yes.
basically, as I said, the earliest time you could have started your work in the host laboratory is April 25.
Yeah, I see. You got the idea, Maria. Thank you. So let's move over to the Q&A.
Just to tell you, the first question from where I didn't answer yet, it's can I start the LOI and not finish it immediately? Save the progress at 12:39 p.m. Can you find it?
Okay, I'll go there. Yep, here we go.
Yeah.
Can I start the LOI
From
and
there.
not finish it? Well, our new system allows you, so you have pre-registered, you're in the system. You can start your LOI, save it, but you have to submit it prior to the submission deadline. Okay. If you are too late and then your LOI is not submitted, and then you're not in the competition. So you can save it before, but you have to make sure that you submit it before the deadline. Sure. Can you submit if you're not eligible for PhD? I'm scheduled to graduate this upcoming October.
Sure. If that is asking if you not have yet completed your PhD, then yes, of course, you can apply.
Exactly. Should the proposal be realistic and be using current? Oh, we've answered that one. That was in the chat already. I'm from a non-EU country. Did my MSc in Germany 2 years and did my PhD in the Netherlands. Yes. Can I apply for an HFSP fellowship to do a postdoc in Germany? No, because you've done your master study in Germany for 2 years. So go to Italy or France or the US. Can I still apply if the host supervisor also submits a similar project for an ERC grant? We are not concerned by the ERC. If you apply for a host supervisor who currently applies for an ERC grant, that's fine. That's okay. We have no issue with that. For example, I work in organoids in pancreatic cancer. I will go to a new host to organoids in chip to solve pancreatic cancer. Other problem. Is it possible as a new innovative state? No. I think this would be too close to what you've done before. I don't think it would really register on any scale as a significant move into a new direction or a departure from your previous work. So I would advise against. Can this fellowship application contain part of IP that the applicant would like to further develop, or is it necessary to have a publication as a foundation for it? For example, genetic engineering or difficult locate. In general, we do recognize that different research areas have different publication habits, like in computation or in information technology. But I think it depends. You would need to send us this thing and we would need to check it. If this would qualify or stand as a publication. I think we would need to know more details about that. Yeah, intellectual property, I knew that, but it really depends on what is behind that IP thing. Similar non-EU country where I did my PhD in 2022, came into Germany for 2.9 years postdoc fellowship. I think you are close to becoming ineligible because you are on the border of becoming a 3-year postdoc. And our time window for applying
December
after the
2022
PhD
is still fine. The cutoff date is September, but you cannot apply, of course, to do your postdoc in Germany.
Yeah,
so this is getting very close now. Yeah.
So okay. 2 more questions in the chat.
In the chat, I see that. Yeah. But the last one we just answered. Can I apply if I finish my PhD in March 2026? Well, sure. You're ahead of the game. I mean, you're very reassuring that you will get your PhD in March 2026. So that's fine. You can apply by September, or it's just way ahead. You would still be able to apply then for the next deadline, but you can try.
Okay, and the last one in the chat, what is the approximate percentage of applicants
Who are invited in
yeah.
September? Barbara, the relationship, how much percentage
that's about, I would say 40%, 45%, very high chances.
So you have to make it past the LOI stage. The LOI is a very critical component in our application process. It's not long, but it's very important to get this right. And so I would recommend to write the LOI, draft the first version, and have it looked by your PhD supervisor or any other mentor of yours to make sure that you sort of tick all the boxes. I have one first author paper under review. If it is not accepted by September, my application will be declined.
If it's your only first author paper, then yes.
Yeah.
It has to be accepted in a peer-reviewed journal by the submission deadline.
It has to be at least accepted. Any word limit for one-page LOI?
Yes.
It's not a one-page LOI, and the word limits will be given automatically because it's an online form. So you will see it when you register. You go to our Proposal Central submission system, and then you have different fields that are limited. 3,000 characters LOI. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
All right. I think we covered all points. Thank you very much. This was great. I hope you took some information and helpful hints and tips for submitting your fellowship application to HFSP. We are looking forward to read all that and hopefully see you as future HFSP fellows. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.